Buyers and sellers across the NFL are starting to declare themselves as we enter week 7. Should the Dolphins be prepared to be on either side of that coin? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. You can find all of our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll be started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. NFL trade deadline less than a month away. And so today on the show, we're going to be looking at, depending on how the next week, 2 weeks plays out for the Dolphins, who are some of your best trade assets if you are the Miami Dolphins, and what this team needs to see in order to know if they should buy or sell. But this is spurred, of course, by action across the rest of the league, which we saw kickstarted yesterday with buyers in the AFC East and sellers elsewhere in the AFC. And we looked yesterday at why Week 6 was such a pivotal turning point for this Dolphins season because of the landscape of the AFC and what direction this season is going to turn for the team. Well, some of the underwhelming elements of that AFC conference, you have already started to see those teams declaring themselves as sellers. And that includes two teams that are sitting at 1-5. The Cleveland Browns, who the Dolphins are scheduled to play later this season, they traded Amari Cooper to the Buffalo Bills, which is not great news for the rest of the AFC East. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 1-5. They traded a defensive tackle, Roy Robertson Harris, to the Seattle Seahawks for a late round pick. So two of the 4 teams in the NFL currently sitting at 1-5 have already traded an asset away, and it's October 16th today. Of course, that does not include the 2-4 Las Vegas Raiders. That situation's a little different with that team trading away Devontae Adams. Adams, of course, going to the New York Jets, who are also at 2-4. The Jets are buying at 2-4. The Raiders are trading an asset away at 2-4. Miami sitting at 2-3. Could kind of tip or tilt one way or another. Right? And you're on the cusp of getting your quarterback back. And again, all that just feeds into why I think this game, for what path your season is going to unfold under, is a critical one. It really is. Now you have the Bills trading a 3rd-round draft choice to acquire Amari Cooper in a contract year. You have the Jets trading a conditional 3rd that could be a 2nd if Adams is an all-pro, probably not going to happen, and he's on the roster and the Jets playing the AFC Championship game. Also probably not going to happen with the Jets currently sitting at 2-4 on the season. I mean, in order to make a deep playoff run, you'd like to not play 2 games on the road in that process, which means you're going to have to chase down Buffalo, if you're the Bills now, or the Jets now 2.5 games behind them, and you still got to go to Buffalo and play later in the season. And they trumped your Adams move by getting Amari Cooper in the same day. So for the rest of the league, New England was not expected to be competitive. I don't expect that they're going to be a team that ends up selling. I think part of the motivation for Miami, if the season continues to trend downward, if you lose in Indianapolis and fall to 2-4, and then you lose to Arizona the following week and fall to 2-5, you should probably be looking to sell and have an honest conversation, because you're going to play the Bills the following week. I'll spoil alert, you're going to be 2-6 if that's the case. So if it goes that way, I personally think the team should be looking at having the big, hard-to-swallow pill of the way the season has gone. they'd have to run the table, right, to have any chance of being um, a viable um, home field playoff opportunity, let alone playoffs at all. But as you look at the rest of the league, Tennessee sitting at 1-4, they were a really aggressive team, but they're also with a first year head coach. I don't know that they would be selling. They have put everything around a quarterback, and it just hasn't clicked. Of course, that the game that the quarterback didn't play is the game that the Titans won, and it's the game against Miami because, of course, it was. But the Rams are a team who's already undergone the youth movement. They've already sold a lot of their pieces. I don't think they have a lot to sell at this point. Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, I really don't foresee that team going down that path. Carolina, first-time head coach, spent a lot of money to bring guys in, tried to build around a quarterback, and it hasn't clicked. There's not a lot of teams that I look at that are currently sitting at the bottom of the standings that I think will make a lot of sense to sell a lot of pieces other than the teams that have kind of already declared themselves. Cleveland is a team that's restructuring everybody, so their players are going to be available for cheap via trade, as far as it doesn't take a lot of salary cap space to bring somebody in from the Browns if you're acquiring a player. Jacksonville, that coaching staff and that front office, there's going to be politics in play there, as there is with all of these decisions for teams. And I think that's an interesting piece of the puzzle for Miami as far as making a decision to buy or sell, depending on what the next two games probably shake out as for you. Because you can ask yourself the question, the executive and the coach, they want to win games to further promote their stability. And if they lose the games, you're looking at potentially a third cycle of trying to build something back up after we made a build with Brian Flores, and then we made a parallel or a transitional move at head coach. And if it doesn't come together, and then you do need to kind of go back a few steps to try to build the rest of this roster back up, has your executive earned the right to be there with the concerns that exist with the coaching staff? Do you want to press forward with that coach? It's all very up in the air and unknown. And their pressure is to win the games so that they have a firmer resume when you get to the end of the year, to continue trying to build this team on the current path and trajectory that it's on. I think there's fundamental changes that would be required, even if you retained everybody. But it does muddy the water quite a bit. But the good news is, if the Dolphins do find themselves in the position to have to sell, I don't know how many more players or how many more teams are going to find themselves in an undeniable position that they're going to, other than Cleveland and Jacksonville's teams that have been early into this boat at 1-5, to do so, which gives you an opportunity, if you have to sell, to maybe find some partners because of scarcity across the league for teams that are just trying to build foundation with what they are and who they are as a team. So they don't want to dump players at the end, or teams that are kind of on the brink and feel like they can make a postseason run, or a team that's got a 41-year-old quarterback, even though they're 2-4 and they've fired their head coach already, who really feels like they're backed into a corner and they don't have a choice. And for all of the holes that you can poke in the path that the Dolphins have done, yeah, we're going to start throwing some AFC East shade around here. Joe Douglas was brought in to fix things for Sam Darnold, and that didn't work. So then he got a chance to draft a guy in the top 3, and he drafted Zach Wilson. That guy was a total flop. And then he got a chance to bring in one of the all-time greats in Aaron Rodgers. And if it doesn't go well for him this year, as many questions as you could look at what Miami's done under the Chris Greer regimes, I think the Jets are arguably even worse. And Chris is still on his first pick at quarterback. You're looking at the Jets on their third. And it hasn't worked with any of them to this point. So it better work in 2024 for the New York Jets. But that's all that much more reason for them. If they lose to Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football this weekend, they're not going to sell. They're 2-5. They got to win. We're going to look a little bit more about the Dolphins, what they need to see in order to buy or sell. That's coming your way next year on Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even if they're not actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. I mean, LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. If you are looking to get a little action going this weekend, why don't you do so over at Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the best place with real money sports action with over 10 million active members and billions in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot at up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, available in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas. The only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So if your lineups stay in play, even with an injury, if your player goes out in the first half of a game, Prize Picks will keep your selections in play even with that injury. So you could sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So go to the Prize Picks app, download the Prize Picks app, use code LOCKEDONNFL, get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Probably time to have the talk about the schedule. Right? Miami, win at Jacksonville, losses to Buffalo, Seattle, Tennessee, win at New England. Bye week. We talked yesterday how pivotal this game is internally for the team. And I know there's a lot of fans. Y'all have punted on your expectations. Y'all have considered it a lost season because of the early season adversity. And I get it. You do play all the games, though. And sometimes these things can turn. There are teams that start slow and turn it around. I'm not guaranteeing to you that that's going to happen for the Dolphins, not by any means. My expectations are out the window. I'm in evaluation mode, and I'm evaluating every element of the football team. And I want to ask myself at the end of the year, based off what I see over the next 12 games, should you be here long term? This person, this person, this person, this person, this player, this player, this player, all the way down the list. And the ones who the answer is yes for, those are the pillars in which your foundation is built for whatever the 2025 team is going to look like. But they still have 12 games to play. And if they win in Indianapolis and they win at home against Arizona, and then suddenly you're 4-3, you could find yourself going to Buffalo 2 days before the trade deadline for a chance to win that football game. Obviously, the results against that team speak for themselves. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Please don't get all huffy in the comments. I'm not playing on Sundays. I'm just saying outcomes in every individual game is going to have a binary outcome of win or loss. I think the next 2 weeks are determining whether or not you're buying or selling, because you don't expect to go to Orchard Park and win in Buffalo. You haven't done that since 2016, I think is the last time you won in Orchard Park. So, we're not expecting that. But even if you win the next 2 and then lose in Buffalo, you're 4-4, 48 hours out from the trade deadline. You were a team that had aggressive aspirations. And if you beat Indianapolis and Arizona, and you beat them in ways that look like your team has signs of life beyond just playing against poor competition, like 1 in 5 teams in Jacksonville and New England. If that's the case, then I think you could probably justify yourself into saying, okay, well, we've normalized a little bit. We're looking a little bit more like the team we thought that we can be. Who's available for us to go out and buy? It's a story for another day, because we need to see that happen first before I invest the time and the research to go through those potential seller rosters and really get into the weeds on that. And I'm skeptical that would happen. But that, I think, is what you need to see if you're the Dolphins to feel as though that's a conversation that you should be having going into the Week 9 game. because they pushed the trade deadline back this season. The trade deadline is now November 5th, Tuesday, November 5th. You play at Buffalo for the 8th game of your schedule on the 3rd. So I think that's what you have to see. I think you would have to win both Indy and Arizona to actively buy and find an excuse to buy and get you back up over 500. And then you're presumably going to lose to Buffalo. And now once again, you're playing for a wild card spot. And if you're going to make a wild card push and you're going to get hot at the end of the year and you're going to draw the right team and you're going to win playoff game on the road, you're probably going to need reinforcements versus what you currently have. Now, if you lose at Indy, I don't think it's as simple as if you lose at Indy, you should sell. Because of the pressure for the people in the brain trust that are going to want to win games, for the strength of their individual resumes to continue to lead the franchise with their vision and what it should look like. I think if you lose the next two, and then you have to go on the road to play at Buffalo, LA Rams, and that's a Monday night game. Can we flex that out, please? Because this team's never really played well in primetime under Mike McDaniel. If that's the case, then I think you probably have to have the hard conversation, take the hard to swallow pill, and say, we need to make some seismic changes. And that's probably going to need and require more rookie talent. And that's going to involve us maybe not paying some players new contracts with the team that are in expiring contracts. I think some of that becomes muddied by who I think probably your most, if you were to look at expiring contracts and guys that historically play positions that this brain trust has not paid, your most attractive option in as far as a trade asset is a guy who's got a broken hand right now in Javon Holland. I don't want to do the thing before the thing, but that is certainly a complicating factor to having the conversation. If you lose the next two games and you're going into at Buffalo and you kind of have that solemn look on your face and say, well, we're 2-5. If we go to 2-6, let's see what kind of business we can get done and go back to the drawing board. And maybe some of that comes from the owner too. If they don't want to do that in lieu of winning games, I think you have opportunities to maybe maximize what kind of picks you get back, the compensatory pick strategy and all that. That it's good stuff. And the Dolphins are in a position to still cash on Christian Wilkins and they'll cash on Robert Hunt. It's a question of if he stays healthy or not, whether that's a 3 or a 4. That's great. But that process, the downside to that is you do have to wait a full annual cycle to see the returns on that. Whereas if you're sitting at 2-6, well, we theoretically, you need to go 7-2 the rest of the way to have any chance at all to just make the playoffs. 7-2, and you got to go to the Rams and play at Green Bay. You got to play at Houston. You got to play San Francisco. You got to play at the Jets. Like, you going 7-2 in that stretch? Probably not, realistically. Hard to swallow pills are hard to swallow for a reason. But if you can not wait a year to get returns on a few players in that process, if you have that sink to that level, it might be wise to do. Who are players who could be in play if this season goes awry further than it already has? That's what we're looking at next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure that you stick with us. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bet. And interestingly enough, for Dolphins Colts at Lucas Oil Stadium for Week 7, we've seen some line movement for this game. And the line movement has been in favor of the Dolphins. Just yesterday when we did the show, Miami was plus 3.5 going to Indianapolis. As of this moment in time, the Dolphins are plus 3, a half a point. So it seems as though the money is coming in on the Dolphins in this game. If you agree, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guarantee when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So I'm looking at the Dolphins depth chart and asking myself, players that may not have long-term futures here. And I think there's a couple qualifying things that you need to determine first. Guys who had a contract done this year, generally speaking, the vast majority of them had contracts done that resulted in getting a lump sum cash paid up front, which means minimal salary. And for the Dolphins and their salary cap situation, is that feasible? There's conflicting reports about what the Dolphins' current salary cap space is. A lot of that has to go back to the Tyreek Hill contract. So Tyreek Hill's obviously your most high-profile player on the team. He's kind of been trolling with the Kansas City Chiefs stuff in recent weeks, but he's effectively communicated he wants to continue to be here without knowing with 100% certainty, and I don't, because your cap resources, and I've now roped in the NFLPA public reports in addition to Spot Track and Over the Cap. All the numbers are different, and it makes it hard for me to definitively say yes or no the Tyreek Hill contract is one that would be feasible for the Dolphins as far as salary cap space and what would and would not accelerate into the current year versus cap space that they do or don't have. So I don't think that that's necessarily one that moves the needle a ton. Jalen Ramsey, obviously the way that they just conducted that contract, I would put that one in the same boat. I don't think those are players that you can just outright sell without knowing the intimate details of the salary cap implications of both. But there are players that I think you can explore. And that includes, obviously, Javon Holland, who has a sterling reputation across the league. He plays the safety position, which is a devalued position, but he has ample potential to be a star player in the NFL. He's already a quality starter. I know some Dolphins fans that want to see more splash and impact plays have been frustrated by the lack of that with Javon Holland, and I get it. I understand why that critique exists. And I don't think Javon's played the best football of his career in the first month of the season. And he's dealing with a hand injury. So all of that leads to, okay, what do you have a better likelihood of cashing? Can you get a third-round pick for 2025 if you moved on from Javon Holland if the season spiraled? Or do you have a better chance of letting him hit the free agency market and getting the Xavier McKinney-esque contract from somebody else as a top of market signing? And what would that do for your outlook for a potential compensatory pick if he left it that way? And I would say this: Xavier McKinney is currently scheduled for a 4. So I think that's probably the conversation. If you lose the next 2 games, Indianapolis at Indianapolis and home against Arizona, if you lose them both, and this conversation becomes a reality that is undeniable, you have to ask yourself, is Javon Holland a player that we are going to see play here long-term? Or does the Jalen Ramsey contract and his ability to move around and his ability to play safety, does that become the player that you've committed yourself to over the next 2 to 3 seasons beyond this year? And if the answer to that is yes, and you don't intend on investing in Javon Holland, and I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't, but if that's a determination that they make, if the season over the next couple of weeks goes the way that it has the potential to go if you lose the next 2, I think that's the comparative tool that you have to gauge a decision. Is somebody willing to give you a 4 now? Because remember, the 4s for the compensatory picks in every round go at the end of the round. So if somebody's willing to give you a 4 now, it's going to be an earlier pick than what the compensatory pick would be, and you don't have to wait a year to get it. If your intent with your internal evaluation of Javon Holland to not bring him back. And these are the ones you got to hit out of the park. I will say this, based on what Zach Sealer's look like, based on what Calais Campbell's look like, based on the contract for Christian Wilkins. You can't plan on Christian Wilkins getting injured. I think there's a decent chance they got the Christian Wilkins internal evaluation about what to pay and what to offer and having a principle of what you're going to give and not give. I think they have a chance of getting that one right. I think the depth of the group was hurt, but signing Christian Wilkins wasn't going to help that other than him playing an extra 20% of your snaps on the season. What if he gets hurt for you? Now you're really screwed, right? So there's been a lot of things that have not worked for the Dolphins, but I don't know that the Wilkins decision, as you watch it unfold and play out, and what Miami's alternative was with Calais Campbell and Zach Sieler's a guy internally in-house, I don't know that one's one of them. So I think that's part of the conversation for evaluating Javon Holland if you lose the next 2 games. Of course, the injury is a complicating factor there. Kader Kohou's an interesting one for me, just because the team has generally resisted the urge to play him outside. They've continued to invest in other corners, whether it's Kendall Fuller or drafting Cam Smith. And I'm not saying that Cam Smith's going to work out or anything like that, but just their attitude towards investing and Kader playing inside. Well, I think Kader's been much better this year playing outside than he has been inside. I think in a lot of these zone match and reactions to motions, and you got to leverage what the offenses are doing, all of those decisions happening fast is still new to Kader. And Kader's super cheap, right? He's on an undrafted free agent contract. And you're talking about a player that has, he has another year's worth of player control, or is he a restricted free agent? Let me make sure I get this right. I would hate to butcher it here since we're 27 minutes in. Kader Kohou's in the last year of his deal, but he's going to be a restricted free agent. So that gives a team an opportunity to offer him a tender next year if they like what they see and get him back, and they want to bring him back. That's at a dramatic discount as compared to a guy who is playing 80% of snaps in 2022, 85% of snaps in 2023, 73% of snaps in 20. Like, this is a high volume snap taker at a premium position who I think can play outside and play man coverage, and has played in the nickel. Are you gonna how simple are you willing to make things in the nickel for him? Ideally, it's a player that you keep, but you again have to conduct your own internal review of him as a player and ask yourself, are we willing to let him play outside? Are we committed to playing more in the nickel? But we just did Ramsey, and Ramsey's going to play there. Like it gets interesting, is what I would say. The last one that I have, and I don't really know all that much about the feasibility of this contract either. But if Terron Armstead stays healthy, and you're 2-6, and you know this is probably the end of the road for Terron Armstead and tenure and considered retirement, not that you'd get a great draft pick for him, but a tackle of that caliber, if you know that you're done and you have a second-round pick who you trusted enough to start over Kendall Lamb in week 4 at home against Tennessee, and you want to get that process started of evaluating that player, and you know this season is for all intents and purposes going to come up short of your goals and aspirations of postseason runs and all that kind of stuff. Could you get something? Something's better than nothing. Something's better than retirement, right? So I think that's probably a name that most fans would perk up for. Of course, the challenge with Terron is Terron and durability are not necessarily things that go hand in hand. And you're talking about making a decision potentially 3 weeks from now. A lot can happen in 3 weeks from an availability perspective. Of course, Terron already missed a game with concussion protocol, has been bumped up. I don't know that that's your best player with youth on his side option is Javon, but you're on the doorstep of a mega contract if you move a reasonable pick if it's another team. Kader Kohou plays a premium position, is young, offers another year player control courtesy of restricted free agency. I think that's like both of those guys I think could feasibly fetch higher than Terron, but like Could you get a day 3 pick, a mid to late day 3 pick for Terron Armstead for a team that's all in if they lose an offensive tackle who goes down for the year? Remember, Terron reduced his salary this year to make it work in Miami. Is he receptive to doing that? Do you want to do right by him and give him a chance to compete for a Super Bowl? Like there's a lot of questions that go into that. But that's one that if this season, you lose the next 2 games, you find yourself sitting at 2-5 and the prospect of 2-6 going into Buffalo to play. I'd explore it. I'd at least explore it and open your opportunity to play Patrick Paul and play him for the season, the rest of the season. So that's, should we be prepared to sell? Who are the names looking to sell? If it's a Tyreek Hill situation and you want to move on from that, I do think that's probably something after the season is probably where you're going to get a better value for Tyreek Hill. You have the reduced salary financial, but there's also the impact on the Dolphins on that side of things as well. I'm not saying you should do any of these things. I can't emphasize that enough. But I'm saying depending on the road in which the fork in the road that's upcoming in the next 2 weeks, which way it goes for Miami, these are conversations that I think internally you can at least explore. We did them here and now because we're getting ready for a game. We have a crossover Thursday tomorrow, Locked On Colts. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the Colts on Friday, look at that team in depth, where things can go. And we will do that on Friday. So you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here. Go Fins.